If you've seen any of my recent videos related to Star Wars, you'll know that The Last Jedi killed my enthusiasm for the movies, and now Rise of Skywalker came out and basically trampled on the grave of that enthusiasm. Going forwards, if there are any new movies released, I cannot imagine myself getting excited about them. However, in November, the new Disney streaming platform debuted in the US. It's called Disney Plus, and with it, the first live action TV series set in the Star Wars universe. And as it was announced, we only knew a handful of things about it. We knew the name, The Mandalorian. We knew it would center around a bounty hunter played by Pedro Pascal. We knew it would take place somewhere between The Return of the Jedi and a new trilogy of films, and it would aim to be a space western of sorts. We also knew that the main creator was going to be Jon Favreau, known amongst other things for Iron Man, which kickstarted the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And Dave Filoni would also be heavily involved. He's a guy known for his work on the two animated series set in the Star Wars universe, Clone Wars and Rebels, which were both universally loved. So I'll admit, putting my disdain for the movies aside for a second, I did actually feel hype for the upcoming series. And then it started coming out, and I could not be happier because it exceeded all of my expectations. I loved everything about it. I think it's perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing. I think the main reason why it did turn out so good is the approach of the creators. See, they were digging deep. For comparison, if you take a look at the latest trilogy of films, okay, it is clear that especially J.J. Abrams was looking into the original trilogy for inspiration, or rather, simply lifting entire things and plot elements with the assumption that, hey, they worked before, so they will probably work again. Favreau and Filoni instead took a long hard look not at Star Wars itself, but what inspired Star Wars in the first place. And the answer for that was Japanese cinema, most notably Akira Kurosawa. If you analyze the plot of the original Star Wars, it's almost a carbon copy of a Kurosawa film called The Hidden Fortress. So now the creators of The Mandalorian said, okay, let's try to find inspiration there. Let's take a look at other prominent examples of Japanese cinema and use that as a basis of our Western in space. And they've done just that. The series as a whole is heavily inspired by a whole group of Japanese films known under the term Lone Wolf and Cub, where you have an older, grizzled, lonely warrior that takes a child under his wing and protects him, and slowly they develop a bond. That's the core of The Mandalorian, in terms of not just the plot, but even more importantly, the emotional core. It would have been very easy to make it a really serious and dark series. The central character is a ruthless mercenary killing people for money. But the addition of the child, which I'm sure is not a spoiler at this point in time because memes with Baby Yoda, as he's been called by the fans, are all over the internet by now. The addition of the child brings levity and humor and also makes the audience care. I found myself repeatedly smiling ear to ear at something cute that the child did, or be incredibly tense whenever it was in danger. In terms of inspirations, although Lone Wolf and Cub is the largest one, there are others as well. One episode, for example, is heavily based on Seven Samurai, but because it's done in such an intelligent way, where you lift specific elements that worked, but move them into the Star Wars world and do it, in a smart way, it works. Also, about digging deep for inspiration, I want to say that the world building is absolutely superb and also follows the original Star Wars. See, those early movies were full of characters, droids, alien races, spaceships that would look cool, but only show up for a minute. They were part of the background, but because we saw that they're real and they obviously have some story behind them, only we didn't necessarily get to know that story at the time, it made the whole film feel alive. And that's also why Star Wars has been such a breeding ground for additional media and fan fiction. I think you can point out every single background character in one of the first three movies, and most likely someone later wrote a book or a comic about them, explaining in detail who they are. I think this is also something that the new movies didn't get. Every time they would include something cool and new, or reference anything from the old trilogies, they would be very in your face about it. Like, look how cool this is. World building, yay. Meanwhile, The Mandalorian also reaches deep in Star Wars lore, even in the books and video games, and uses that lore, but mostly does it very quietly and subtly. Put it this way, if you're a casual viewer, you'll just watch the series and appreciate how alive and diverse the world feels. But if you're a fan, there will be 20 little things you can spot in each episode, like this particular model of ship that comes from that video game, or this race of aliens that was introduced in that one animated series. It shows great care and attention to detail, but it also shows restraint and being sort of humble about it, and about using those established elements, and respecting not just the viewer and their ability to pick up on this stuff, but also the established lore itself. The biggest thing is obviously the whole character of the Mandalorian. See, in the Star Wars lore, the Mandalorians are a warrior race, although the series itself reveals they're not a race specifically, they're more like a nation, I guess. And the most defining characteristic is, of course, the armor with the distinctly looking helmet. You may recognize it from Boba Fett or Jango Fett. That's exactly the thing. The Mandalorians are very big on weapons, combat training, and a specific brand of honor, a code, if you will. And one of the biggest parts of their lore is that they never remove their helmets in front of other people. Protection is one thing, but it's also kind of like part of their religion. They're not allowed to show their faces. So when I heard that Pedro Pascal was cast, I was worried that with such a bankable star, they would want to show as much of his face as possible. I dreaded that he would just remove the helmet in the second episode and never pick it up again. Well, you can rest easy about that, because the series is very, very consistent about this part of the plot. It is in general very consistent about everything else in regards to especially the main character. There's that thing in the first episode where at the beginning he fulfills a contract, and as a reward he gets a little chunk of Beskar. Now, Beskar in the Star Wars universe is an extremely powerful metal. Think adamantium or vibranium from Marvel, right? It is used to create mostly armor because it's so resilient. It can withstand physical attacks, it can withstand laser shots, and I think in the lore it's even established that it is capable of taking a lightsaber hit and surviving. So he gets that, and he goes to a Mandalorian blacksmith, which is badass as hell, by the way, and they begin talking about sigils and shit, and the blacksmith is melting the Beskar in the forge. And I'm worried she'll just make it into a ring or something, another useless thing, which wouldn't really fit the story. But then it is revealed she made an armor guard out of the Beskar, and so the Mandalorian just replaces the old one he was using with the new better one. He upgrades his worn out set of armor with this new piece. And I'm sitting there like a child giggling, because it's just like watching your friend play a really good RPG video game with upgrades and character progression. It's a fantastic feeling to see this on the screen. So we've established that the Mandalorian himself is brilliantly done, but so are the side characters, not the fully background ones I already mentioned, but the ones that do actually speak and play a role in the story. Every single one that shows up in the first season is fleshed out, interesting, and has something unique about them. My favorite was the Imperial officer played by Werner Herzog. Now, Herzog, if you don't know him, is mostly famous for directing multiple documentaries, but as an actor, he has this unbelievably magnetic presence, especially with his strong German accent. Every time he was on screen, I just wanted him to keep going, just keep saying stuff, because it was so entertaining. He also inadvertently, he himself as a person, not as a character, he made the series better, because there's that story that in one of the early episodes, they shot his scenes with the Baby Yoda puppet, and then they removed it and said, okay, let's shoot the scenes again without it, and we'll try adding the puppet as a CGI character, maybe it'll look better. And Herzog just looked at the director and said, you are cowards, leave it. And they did. They ended up using the footage with the actual physical puppet. In technical terms, the series looks and sounds like a proper Star Wars movie. I don't know what the budget was exactly, but there's not a single moment where you feel like they had to cut corners because of it. The sets, the costumes, the special effects, it's all at the absolute highest level. In the Mandalorian, there's also the case of music, which in the series was not done by John Williams. He scored all the Skywalker saga movies, and I think it's fair to say that his scores have been one of the most iconic in the history of cinema. I can't imagine a person that hears the main theme of Star Wars and doesn't recognize it, even not seeing the movie. So in The Mandalorian, we actually have new music composed by Ludwig Göransson. And from the very first episode, you know it's also going to be something special. Particularly the main theme is so catchy and recognizable, but also so fitting to the tone of the series, that space western vibe. I have been listening to it even outside of watching the episode, and it's just a bloody brilliant piece of music. It does convey that atmosphere. Final thing that I want to touch about is the release model. Unlike most of the Netflix series, it was not all dumped on one day. Instead, one episode was released every week. And I know there are many people out there that enjoy the Netflix model and will binge a whole series, a whole season of a series in one night. But that is just so foreign to me, so tiring. And in my personal opinion, it hurts your reception of the series. Because if you watch it straight, not only you get tired because you have multiple hours of viewing at one time, you also don't get that cooling down period in between the episodes where, yes, there's the anticipation for the next one, but you also get to really cool down and think about each individual episode. You get to try to figure out in your own time what worked, what didn't work. You can discuss with other people about the specific episode, maybe find out what details you missed. And that's something you could do with The Mandalorian as it was coming out. And I think that's something you miss out with the Netflix series released all at once, because then the discussion inevitably becomes about the whole season as a whole, and you don't get to talk to people about each specific episode. There's also the runtime, which differs with each episode. I think the longest one is about 50 minutes, the shortest one is around 30. And that's also a very reasonable decision, I think, to let each episode take as much time as it needs to tell the story. And on the other hand, if that time is shorter, like with the 30-minute episode, it's shorter than standard 45 or whatever, that's fine too. You can keep it shorter. You don't have to add any unnecessary filler just to make it longer, just to fill that runtime. And also at the end of each episode, as credits roll, you always have a bunch of concept art for scenes from that particular episode. And those pieces are all gorgeous. I always stayed for the full credits to just to see them all. I know I've talked a lot, but I tend to do that when I get excited, and I am excited for The Mandalorian still. I know it's easily the best series I've seen this year. In my book, it's a perfect 10 out of 10, and I hope the second season will be at least as good as this one. And I will say this, regardless of how good it is, I still maintain that I'm not looking forward to any new movies. But season 2 of The Mandalorian or other Disney Plus series with this production value, keep them coming. This is the way.